Greetings, campers, and welcome back to another episode of Camp Legend. My name is Gibby, and with me is Ian, and we are going to be breaking down all of the legendaries into a tier list for the new Azurite Sea set that is coming out here in a couple of weeks for Disney's Lorcana. We are really excited about this next set. There looks like some really spicy cards that are going to change the meta game for a couple different colors within Disney Lorcana, and we're going to rank them on how viable we think there are into different tiers. We're going to give a breakdown of maybe some of our opinions about maybe where they're going to be the most applicable. So Ian, take it away. We'll pull up our tier list screen and we'll go over each of those cards.
Alrighty, so we have the tier list here pulled up. I do want to break down sort of how we're ranking these things. I think it's important to talk about what the tiers mean. Because it's not always like a straightforward thing of 5 stars, 1 star, right? That's a little bit oversimplified. So S tier, we are reserved for meta warping or meta defining cards that we've had in the past, like Diablo. I think we can definitely say is a meta warping card. We can look at things like Lucky Dime, right? That has defined entire archetypes and forced people to consider running item removal and understanding that it accelerates the game plans of those item decks. So anyways, we have meta warping here, and we're going to make our best guess to see, is anything in here meta warping? We'll find out. Meta staple is things along the lines of like Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, Beast, Tragic Hero. Not necessarily the card itself that's warping the metagame, but it is the card that is sort of a staple in multiple archetypes and multiple meta decks. In B tier, we have meta splash cards. These are cards that we think are going to be relevant, but they may not be in every deck of that color. They may not be always at a 4 of, so it might be something very powerful that you would only run like 2 copies of. Think things like the new Ana legendary from last set that had a nice 1 or 2 of copies in these Emerald Steel decks, and very powerful in that deck, less powerful in every single deck that is green. So in C tier, we have Rogue or anti-meta potential. I'm looking at this as things that we think could have some viability as a surprise card, as an anti-meta card, a card that you play to target a specific matchup, but not something that's going to be in every version of a given list. So Emerald Steel might run, there might be a deck that runs 1 copy of this card, or 2 copies of this card, but the majority of them don't. We do see those sorts of things pop up in big tournaments where somebody had that really big brain tech card of, I'm going to throw 1 copy of this thing in and it's going to win me this matchup. That's kind of what C tier is. And then D tier, let's be real, this is the Camilo Madrigals, right? This is the Mirabelle Madrigals, really a lot of the Madrigals apparently. This is the memes and binder fodder tier.
Justice for Encanto.
Justice for Encanto, indeed. I have all this, I've got my playset of Mirabelles and nothing to use them with. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started, Gibby. I want to talk first about Tiana, restaurant owner. So tell me a little bit about Tiana here, and where do you think this should go on our tier list?
Yeah, so for everybody who's watching the YouTube, you can see the card as we're going through, but I'll kind of briefly just describe the card as well and the effects. So Tiana is in Amber. She's a 3-cost uninkable 1/4 Storyborn Hero Princess that quests for 2. Whenever a character of yours is challenged, while this character is exerted, the challenging character gets -3 attack this turn unless the player that was doing the challenging of your opponent is paying an additional 3 ink. So Tiana, to me, is very interesting on a couple different facets. I think she's the fact that she quests for 2 and she's got a solid defense is relevant, right? The 1 attack I'm not so concerned with. I mean, I think at this point there is a plethora of cards that you'd like to have more attacks, so that way they aren't brawlable, they aren't clearable by some of the red tools that are out there. But if Ruby isn't at the forefront of the meta, then this card is going to be fantastic. And I think some of the issues that Ruby decks are having is they are struggling to find slots in their deck to fit all of the removal that they want outside of a Ruby Amethyst deck.
Right.
So I think that Tiana is going to be very good because she's going to be a board, like a natural board protection for tempo decks, maybe even certain aggro decks. She is uninkable, so it is going to require a little bit of careful deck building, but she doesn't require you to do anything else outside of just utilize her questing, and she just protects your board, and it is a big hindrance for your opponent. Now, there are plenty of ways if steel is going to be relevant in the meta, which it usually is. Then a lot of the action clearing doesn't affect Tiana and her ability
really
to want to pay the extra.
It's really just Zeus.
Yeah, I'm thinking that this is going to be a meta splash card. Like, I think it's going to be good. I don't think it is going to be, because there are a number of workarounds for it. I think that could be a meta call that you end up splashing into a deck if there's a lot more character based. Like, I'm kind of between A and B, but like I think Amber, this is a good. It's good in Amber.
I agree. I think it's a B tier card, and that's not a dig on the card. I think we can all agree there's a lot of powerful B tier cards that are important in this game. I think that the card will likely see most play in things like Mufasa lists. I think could really love this deck. They want to establish a lot of units, let them quest out, pressure through board, and the things they don't like are Maui's coming down and Mimfox coming down, and this card heavily counters the whole Ruby Amethyst rush contingencies. Obviously, it does die to a brawl, but then you're 1-for-1ing, and that's not as bad as something where like your board is getting picked apart by Snake trades into one thing, bounce the Snake, play the Fox, trade into another thing. Like those sorts of things and those sorts of interactions can be really tough on Amber board-based decks. So I think this could be really cool in some Mufasa decks. I don't know if it's good enough for aggro, again, because of the cost. But the effect is inherently very strong. It basically says you can't trade into my stuff until you get to a high ink count, because otherwise you're doing nothing else with your turn, and I'm going to be able to turn around and play more things. So I really do think Tiana is a great, well-designed, balanced card. I think that the fact that it has the one attack is the thing that's stopping this from being kind of broken. So I think it's a totally fair and appropriate card. I don't think it's going to be in every Amber deck, which is why I feel like it does not go into that meta staple deck. And I know that meta staple is sort of like, it's sort of nebulous in that, like, yes, technically not every steel deck wants Beast, Tragic Hero, but like every steel deck that isn't running Whole New World probably wants Beast, Tragic Hero. So it's like it's in enough meta versions, and like steel cards are weird because steel is just such a broken color. That like there's so much depth of card value in steel that you have to make some tough choices. But yeah, I think B is just right.
I'd love to test this card with Rapunzel's Tower.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, even more defense. Yeah,
even more defense. Not only are you protecting Rapunzel's Tower, but you're also protecting Tiana as well. They can't, unless they can play that brawl when a character of yours is challenged.
It doesn't challenge, so it doesn't protect locations. It only protects characters. So if they swing on Rapunzel's Tower, they do get the full value. But regardless, I mean, the extra 3 defense makes it harder for them to remove the Tiana, which then protects all your other characters. It's kind of cool.
Well, yeah, but and it is likely with maybe something like this that you're running like a bodyguard of some sort, which would make Tiana even better. But
let's move on to Simba, Pride Protector. We here have a uninkable 5 cost, 4/4 stats, not bad. 2 questing, even better. Shift 3, which is pretty cool. We do know there's plenty of different Simba options in Amber and some in other colors too. And then the effect, understand the balance. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, we're sensing a trend here with Amber, you may ready your other characters. This is sort of a expansion on some effects that we have seen in other Amber cards over the last 2 or 3 sets. Things like Bernard, things sort of like Sven in the last set, although Sven lets you ready it during the turn when it comes down. But we're seeing Amber basically readying up its stuff to protect it from the opponent's trades. So, Gibby, initial thoughts on this, and I do want to say something first. I shouldn't have said your name. My initial thought is this is a really cool effect that is not good enough. But am I wrong? Is there like where would you fit this? Because like I look at our tier list and I'm looking at comparing this to Tiana, and I'm like, I will always rather have a Tiana out than I would rather have that Mufasa, or sorry, that Simba. Is the shift enough to make it a little bit better?
I think it does. I think the fact that we've already got a very relevant, very solid Simba at the 2 cost, meaning that we can shift this on curve and protect a 1-drop. And there's a lot of Amber has always been this complementary color to other color decks. So whatever most likely, you could play the 1-drop Lilo that people really love for the aggressive stat line. Because you're dropping Simba onto the 2/3 bodyguard, and then you'd be able to shift this in, like, and then ready Lilo again. Like, I do think that there is some very relevant and very easy foresight play paths here, where this Simba feels very, very good. I do think the shift makes this very relevant. And the fact that it happens all on your turn before your opponent reacts, I do think makes the ability a bit stronger. If this said at the beginning of your turn, or like if it was a big, granted it wouldn't work at the beginning of your turn because your stuff ready anyway. But like if this was a beginning of your turn effect, I would have concerns. I think this is A tier personally.
Here, okay, I'm pretty sure it's not A tier. I was gonna consider it for B tier. So I do not think that the majority of Amber decks can fit this because it's an uninkable. I think that if this card was an inkable, we're maybe looking at a card that, hey, I'll slot a few of these in. I already like these Simbas. Steel Song probably never wants this, but you do still have the like plenty of other Amber decks that may want to start slotting in their 2/3 bodyguard Simba, but even that Simba has been fading in popularity outside of aggro recently, right? So like my whole thing is like, what deck does this fit in? Even if this is an okay card, I think the only thing redeeming this is the shift, because here's my thing. I love readying my characters. Love it. It's great. But Simba doesn't protect himself. That's the thing that Tiana does that this Simba doesn't. Tiana has the same defense that Simba has, right? But they have to pay 3 to get through to actually challenge Tiana, and Simba. I just can't with the 4 defense. Like if you shift it, they can still just mim on turn 3, right?
Which I think you're fine with at that point, because they didn't really do. They didn't do enough. Like they didn't get, like, the whole point of why Mim Fox is the best is what, like, as a rush unit is because it usually creates a 2-for-1. And if it's not creating a 2-for-1, I think I would still play it.
I think it is. If you shifted this, it is a 2-for-1. That's 7 ink worth, 5 total because of the shift, but that's 2 cards that are going for the 1 card. And you're basically being left with whatever that 1 card is that is still in play that you readied, right? And what do you do if you missed turn 1? You played a Simba, you shifted a Simba, and got no value.
I think if you're going to play this card, you build it where you play a high 1 cost ink count. Like I do think this is a tempo card. I could see it, but I think you can make an argument between A and B. I do think this is going to surprise some people. I'm a little higher on this card, I guess, than you might be. But I think we can easily settle on this as being a meta splash card. Just because
I'm fine with that. I mean, here's the other thing, like the other sort of a bummer thing about Simba is if Amber had some better 5-cost songs to sing, I think we would be like, yeah, this is great. You can shift it and play that equivalent of a whole new world, but there isn't. Blue decks, right? Have How Far I'll Go, right, at 4. So like, oh, we could shift it and sing How Far I'll Go. But like, this is again my struggle with this Simba is just simply like, what are we doing? What part of the big appeal of shift is either getting an immediate value from challenging or questing and an effect that does something when you challenge or quest, right? Or singing something, and we're doing none of that. And the body is good for the price, but then if you play it for 5, you have to wait a whole turn to get its effect. I think
you have to be willing to shift it, which is part, to your point, makes the inkable versus non-inkable part of it relevant.
Tough.
Yeah.
If this was inkable, I would be higher on it. I really would. But it's and there's so many uninkables in the game now, like, and so many great ones. I mean, look, we're comparing Tiana and Simba, like, which am I rather playing right now? It's Tiana, like I can bring it down on the same turn. And anyways,
for the same reason that you have to wait a turn on Simba, you also have to wait on Tiana because she has to be exerted for the effect to be there. So
yeah, true. But she also protects herself, which I like. So
we'll keep it at B for now and see if we're surprised.
Keep them both in B. Let's move on to Amethyst cards. I'll go ahead and close these out. Let's go to Yzma, Conniving Chemist, 4-cost inkable 3/3, quests for 2. Villain and sorcerer tags are somewhat relevant. Mm-hmm. Feel the power. Exert it if you have fewer than 3 cards in your hand. Draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. Gibby, something or nothing?
I don't know. If you have a fewer than 3 cards in your hand, draw until you have 3 cards in your hand. So she is a 4-cost 3/3 that does nothing when you play her, but is very threatening if you don't deal with her. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of value in drawing cards.
But only if you have 3 or fewer cards in your hand.
Right. Which in certain decks, I mean, we've seen how relevant the dock card is.
Sure.
In Steel, but like that's
you have to exert Yzma for that,
right? Like that's immediate. So
yeah,
a 4-cost do nothing in Amethyst decks that want to take advantage of the tempo and those mid turns. To me, like it's not even just about this card. Mm-hmm. It is about what are the other options in Amethyst, and I struggle to find. Like, are you really going to play this over Rabbit? Like Merlin Rabbit? Are you really going to play this over other options? Like even overloading the 3-drop slot? Like,
yeah, I mean, Dolores
don't know.
Has the same stats and draws you the card right away for you to ink or use. Rabbit draws you minimum 2 cards, right?
If this was a shift 3, so you could play 2-drop Yzma and then shift into this, like assuming that you were
bad though.
but like assuming that you were like dumping your hand. Like if you played Blurple and you played 2-drop Yzma and then you were like dumping your hand on 3 or something like that, and continuing to try to, you could maybe. Or if this was like a higher cost card that you were maybe playing on 4 of like a shift or something like that. By that point, you've got a low hand size. I could see it. I think where it's positioned on when you would play it on curve, which you have to evaluate every card as that kind of scenario of when you reach that ink cost, when are you playing this? I think you're right. I think the delayed effect, I mean, by turn 5, because you'd play Yzma, probably continue to drop some cards either on the board, ink them, whatever you need to do, sing with them. You might be able to get some good value out of Yzma. I just think that the scenarios are going to be a bit farther and fewer between.
I also think that like your Yzma is Amethyst, and if you're playing Amethyst, what is the thing you're best at?
drawing cards.
Drawing cards. Why do you need
like you've
this,
already got
which
so many
is-
other options for that.
You've already got friends. You got rabbit bounces. Like you've got followers. You've got magic brooms. Like you have so many ways to either draw or cycle cards. Like why do you? When are you going to be below 3 cards except in discard? Like this feels like a discard counter card. But then if it had ward, maybe. This is the kind of card that should have ward. Actually, this is the kind of card that should have ward. Not these, Prince Johns where they have this passive effect that's always turned on, right? This is the kind of card, the cards that require you to exert them for use. Things like Queen Diviner, Yzma, those are the kinds of cards that should have ward, so you can know that you're going to get that effect the next turn.
Yeah, it's like the Ariel in blue. The Ariel collector.
Yes.
That
she wants to quest, but it's the same difference. Yeah, you're going to turn her to the right.
She has to make herself vulnerable to get the strong effect.
Yes. Yeah.
But she's a little protected outside of that. So I think you think you're right. This would be a great candidate for ward. I wish it had ward, but it doesn't. So
this feels like a C tier card.
This feels C. I don't think
it is.
The effect is relevant. It's just tough.
I can see a world where we get the, someone at the, championships, the European last chance qualifiers or whatever, right? Someone puts 1 or 2 copies of this in a deck because discard is so prevalent, and it feels really good in that scenario. I think the bummer part is that the 3 defense, the no ward, means it's probably just going to get Strength of Raging Fire or double stormed, but whatever. Let's move on.
You could play with the new 3-cost Alice. That when she quests, she gives somebody else like.
I guess if you're running Blurple,
you could. There are ways to give Yzma ward, but that's like a lot of investment.
It's a lot of investment for Yzma. I think Yzma will be best as a one-off sort of techie card. Let's look at Genie, Wonderful Trickster. This is probably the weirdest card we have of the legendaries.
Yeah.
Love the artwork. Big Genie fan. Second legendary Genie we've gotten, ironically. So here we go. 7-cost Inkable. I think that is really important to note, considering the type of card this is. 4 attack, 7 defense, shift 5. Your reward awaits whenever you play a card, draw a card. Dang, that's strong. But Forbidden Treasure, at the end of your turn, put all cards in your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. Quest for 2. I don't know if I said that. Gibby, this Genie card has me, wringing my hands like a mischievous mastermind. Okay. And I think the thing to look at this card with is I think this card will be a nuts card for something like Blurple to be able to like leverage their ridiculous ink cost or ink pool and basically just churn a bunch of things out onto the board all at once. And then, yes, your hand might go onto the bottom, but in the process, you're fishbone quilling the cards, the last few cards, and you're dumping hand size anyways, playing out a lot of little dudes, bouncing them around and stuff. I think that's like kind of okay if you go all in on a board state and then dump hand. And then because it's inkable against the decks where you don't want to dump hand, right? Decks with Be Prepareds or whatever, you just don't have to play this guy. You can just ink him. So I'm actually, I think, a lot higher on this card than maybe other people in the community. I'll set the bar. It's not an S tier card. It's not an A tier card, I don't think. But I think this is a pretty darn cool B tier card.
I was waiting for you to sell me on this being an A tier card.
Oh,
and
okay.
You didn't.
All right.
And
I
you
did.
didn't.
Well, I'm trying to be, responsible to the audience.
And there aren't a lot of that I'm thinking about. There aren't a lot of like great low cost genies to shift too, which I think is relevant to this conversation.
Possibly. Green has some good
Green
genies.
Has like a 3/2 evasive, I think, or a 3/2. 2 cost or 3 cost, I think is what I'm thinking of.
I think it's not evasive. I think it's just a 2/3. Purple does have multiple genies, but I do think, unfortunately, the the best one, the forward cost one, is uninkable.
It is. So green has Emerald has a 2-cost 2/3 that you can shift, and then there is a 2-cost 2/2 that quests for 2 in that Genie Cramped in the Lamp in blue in Sapphire. So like those are, and they're both inkable. So those are going to be your most relevant. Those are going to be your most relevant uses for this. Now, I think you are correct. I'm looking at this as maybe a meta splash. If you find it, like the card is good. I think one of the design pieces I like here is that at the end of the turn, you put all the cards in your hand at the bottom of your deck in any order, not in your discard, because then you'd be really churning through your deck quickly, and you'd be almost like threatening decking yourself out, because this isn't a May trigger. You have to do it. Right. So at that point, you're okay if you're top decking, because essentially if you have one card, you have unlimited cards, but you're just
as long as this guy lives to the next turn. And that's,
that's exactly right. But you're just subject to whatever it is in your hand to play.
Yeah. And I will say, like, if let's say the scenario where you play this down in Blurple deck when you have 10 ink, right? You slam it down, you play a 1-drop, you draw a card, you play a 2-drop, you draw a card, you dump the rest onto the bottom, right? Let's say that happens. And the following turn, they successfully remove Genie. Well, the thing about these Blurple decks, and I know I'm talking strictly about Blurple because I think that's the best use case for this card. Maybe there's a world where you shift this in on an Emerald deck, right? And it kind of acts as like a pseudo Clarabelle, right? Or like in an Emerald Amethyst, like you play Genie instead of Clarabelle. Maybe that's a thing, right? But I think that, like, looking at the Blurple example, that deck is already sometimes in top deck mode, but it has so many cards that cycle, especially against like discard and stuff. It has so many cards that cycle, so many cards that bounce things that draw cards and cycle, right? That, like, I think that you'd be able to dig yourself out of that hole more often than not. It has a ton of reactive tools too. So if you go all in on a board state, first off, they probably throw a lot at this Genie, because this Genie is not dying to any of the standard removal. You would have to have Ice Block plus Medusa is probably the most likely way to kill Genie, and that is a specific color combination, right? Like, what else are you doing that with? Bruno is the best answer for this, right? So Bruno is the worst thing to happen to you. But let it go, whatever, more ink. Like, I don't know. My point is that, like, Steel decks don't have answers to this. Ruby decks don't have good answers or clean answers to this, right? So I think it's a lot more resilient than you think. But even if it isn't, like, there are decks that are designed to have just ton of cycle or a ton of top end, and going to a 0 hand size is not the end of the world for them. And so I think Genie could be really cool. I'm going to be messing with it in Blurple, and hopefully we'll see Genie actually be relevant. Are you good with B tier?
I'm good with B tier. I'm going to make one other pitch for you for an applicability here.
Okay.
I think that this also could work Genie and Jafar in tandem for 2 reasons.
Which Jafar?
The shift Jafar.
Every
time Jafar, if Jafar is exerted, every time you draw a card, you're gaining a lore. Every time you're playing a card, you're automatically drawing a card. You also have the ability to get both triggers for free if you play the lamp.
Right.
So it would draw you 2 more cards. Jafar
so you
gets 2 more cards.
3 cards with
the Jafar, or the lamp would already be on the board.
A lamp would already in play.
But you would draw 2 cards because you'd have Jafar out there, which would give you 2 lore. And then you'd also bounce. You'd also be triggering the Genie to bounce a unit back to their hand that costs 4 or less.
That's cool.
So, like, I think there's a lot of combo potential, and they're both in the same color, so you can splash them very easily for the exerts and for the shifts. I think there is a very relevant possibility here that a Jafar Genie deck makes.
Genie could be really cool for alternate formats too, which I know not everybody is. They're not very well supported right now, but I think we're at the stage of the game with 6 sets that, like, we should be looking at some alternate format like support at this stage. So anyways, okay, Genie in B tier. Awesome. Let's move on. All right, cool. So we have Jasmine. I've blown it up here on big screen, even though I believe it's in German or something. It's in something. Flutgestalt is the that's a Floodborn. I think that's what that means. Anyways, I'm gonna X out of here in a second so we can actually read through the text. But here it is blown up. Obviously, an inkable 6-drop Jasmine 5/5 shift 5. So we can shift onto some Jasmines. There is a pretty solid, I think, 3-drop Jasmine in the set that is really nice. Also in green. 5/5 stats, quest for 2, and Ruler of the Seas. Really cool ability here when you play this character. If you used shift, and I like that we're doing more of these if you use shift to play it, because it does sort of stop things from getting as out of hand as some of the early shift cards. If you used shift to play her, return all other exerted characters to their players' hands, yours and the opponent's. Wow. So potential for a board wipe on a character card is pretty sick. This is the kind of card that when you play the 3-drop Jasmine, and people are going to be looking at you getting up to 5 ink, and they're going to be like, do I quest with this character? Do I challenge with this character? Like, I don't want it to get bounced. This is the kind of card that lets Emerald play for tempo board, but also not worry about like an attrition, remove the opponent's hand kind of game plan, which I really like. We've seen it already be very successful at these tempo plays of bouncing things to hand instead of killing them. We did see some under the sea is a little bit of a different thing, puts on the bottom. But I really like this Jasmine. Gibby, the question is applicability. How often do you think this is going to be applicable? Is there going to be a meta deck that is built around trying to shift these Jasmines and bouncing exerted characters back to their hand to secure an incredible board state? I mean, keep in mind, it does bounce all exerted characters, so it could bounce your own, but because it's on your turn, you get to choose whether you want something to bounce. If you have a rabbit, you could quest first, then shift Jasmine, bounce the rabbit. You also have morph in color. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty excited about this.
So I think, hear me out. We've talked about this. Can you make an entire deck out of cheap lore gainers?
Mm-hmm.
Is this not a really good top deck card or top end card to run in that, where you're playing a bunch of cards, getting cheap lore? Maybe you're questing with them, and then you pop this Jasmine in there, send them all back to your hand. Now they're pretty protected, with the exception of like if they all get ditched out of your hand with discard. Like,
right.
I'm not saying that it's like a clear, like this is going to be really, really easy to pull off. It's a bit of a intentional setup. I kind of think this could be your rogue card.
Okay, so you're thinking like C tier?
I'm thinking C tier. I don't think, or maybe meta. I'm between B and C here. I don't think this is a staple.
I don't think it's a staple. You have to play hard. You have to build into this, right? But I think it's better than a rogue deck. I think a rogue deck is the like, if the miracle happens. But this is inkable, right? You have not just another Jasmine coming out that is a strong card. You also have morph in color. We know how easy it is for these green decks to utilize like the Floodborn synergies. I gotta be honest, I really like it, and
I could see potential
it as the potential to do like a one-sided board wipe is pretty cool for me. So I want to put this in B tier. We have a lot of things in B tier.
I'm fine with that.
So far, I'm seeing no meta staple cards. Maybe Tiana should be up there. I don't know. But I think Jasmine is not the kind of card that you just jam into every green deck. Obviously, it's a Floodborn, requires shift. It cannot be that. But I do think it's the kind of card that will be splashed in some Emerald Amethyst decks and really mess with some people. I truly believe this is a fantastic Emerald Amethyst card. And I'm going to be probably playing with this in the first couple days if I can snag one.
Yeah, it's probably a pick your spot kind of card. Like if you're gonna run morph, this is an easy include, but for a couple of, and then you're like, if I pick my spot, if I see the opportunity to, where I do think that would create an advantageous board state for me. Like if they quested fully,
Yeah, I mean,
you
even if
slow
you've
down an
only
aggro
bounced
deck,
two
you send them all
things,
back to their hand. Like
if
to be
you
able to establish a deck.
if you had a character that said when it comes to the play, bounce two of your opponent's cards, would you play it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Jasmine can do. I mean, and you're right. You pick your spot. You don't always jam it immediately, right? And sometimes you might ink it. And heck, if you can't shift it, and you do have to shift it for the ability, which is the downside of this card, but you can still play a 5/5 the quest for two. You know what I mean?
Well, well, why not just play your first? Like if it's on your turn, all of your characters ready at the start of your turn, why not just play your first? It bounces all of your opponent's exerted characters, and then you quest. Like
no, that's what I said. Yeah, but you can quest with your things that you want to bounce, so you can look at it like I have a rabbit.
You've got a little bit more flexibility to it. Okay, I'm sold. I'm sold on B tier.
With the other things, yeah, I'm going B tier. All right,
as we would say in the fantasy football community, this is high upside.
High upside. Yeah, that's right.
High upside.
Hercules, baby demigod, probably in the running for best artwork. So very good. Funny. As a Hercules fan, you love to see it. Great reference to the movies. So okay, 6 cost, uninkable. 6 attack, Ward. 3 defense. Ward. Yeah. Quest for 2. All right. Ability, strong like his dad. Pay 3 ink, deal 1 damage to chosen damaged character. Gibby, can you find a world where this isn't D tier?
Flynn Rider? Maybe? But why not play Maui instead?
Yeah, play Maui instead, and that's inkable. Yeah, I think maybe if this guy was inkable, we could find some arguments for it. I think that like there is that like Meg Hercules combo whenever you play a Hercules. Yeah. This is one more card for that. It's kind of a gimmick. And it's uninkable, which sort of makes it harder on that deck, which is already hard to fit that package in. Now, if you want to play one more Hercules for it, great, but that's 4 more uninkables. I just think this is. I think if I'm gonna be honest, like I don't think Emerald needed more great legendaries. Emerald is probably the strongest color, maybe Steel, but the discard stuff is just so out of control. I think it's okay that this is a binder fodder legendary. So I think we can just put it there and not talk too much more about it.
You're essentially paying a 6 cost 6/3 to do nothing until the following turn. Even then, the effect to me is
and the 3 defense, man. I mean,
the same effect exists on an uninkable 2 cost 2/1.
Yeah,
and you don't have to pay the 3 ink.
Let's talk about a card that I'm pretty excited for. It might be my favorite legendary.
Okay.
Maui Half Shark. 6 cost inkable 7/5 with evasive. Nice. Quest for 1. Ability Chihu. Whenever this character challenges another character, you may return an action card from your discard to your hand, and then wayfinding whenever you play an action, gain a lore. Gibby, we've seen a lot of these action synergies being pushed and pushed and pushed in both Emerald and in Ruby. They haven't really gone together very great yet. Maybe this will help. It's effective card draw, like not true card draw, but it's card retention, recovery, right? It is hitting all the right buttons as far as stats go. It's inkable. It has a very high quality keyword in evasive, and you can even get a couple points of lore on the turn you play it if you sing songs with characters that are already in play. Gibby, is Maui great, or is it just good? Because I can't be sold lower than good.
I think this is D tier. I'm just kidding. I think this is a great card. I see a lot of decks using this card because you don't even have to be running a high action count.
Yeah.
You just have to be running an action count and have played it at least one time, because you can recycle the same action as long as as many times as you can play it, as many times as you can challenge with Maui, and get it right back to your hand. And if for some reason you're worried about discard, you play the action, challenge with Maui, it comes back to your hand, and then you ink it. it's good for ink. It's good. Yeah, this fuels a lot, including your win condition being gain lore. So like
That's the thing that I think makes this card is actually the lore
like
game.
it's like like everything within the text
Mhm.
works in synergy, works in tandem together. They're not counteracting. It's not a hey, you have to do this or do this.
Yeah.
And if there's no character challenge, then you just quest and you've got a 6 cost 7/5 with evasive, so he protects himself in that manner too. Like what other evasives that you can think of are efficiently clearing a 7/5?
Yeah, no,
with evasive.
I think this card is.
I think it's great.
I think this card is great. I want to propose putting it in A tier. I don't think every red deck will be able to use it, but I do think that enough are going to want to try it. I think enough decks can get value out of it, recovering things, even just recovering things like Brawls or Friends on the Other Side in a Ruby Amethyst deck. Or
this is the 6 cost card that I've been looking for in my Mufasa deck.
I think this is a 6 cost card I've been wanting to play in Ruby Amethyst when I don't want to jam max 6-drop queens in the deck, or 6-drop kill ladies, right? Like, so there are metas where I'm like, I want more top end, but I don't want to run, 4 Medusas and 2 Tremaines. Like, that's too much. I don't want to run them. What do I put in here? I wish I could have more top end, yada, yada, yada. I think Maui is like a tech card in that deck. I think Maui opens up the door for Ruby being paired with Emerald and Steel. And, I don't know. I mean, Amber, it's already solid. I think the thing with Mufasa there is like, you're really only recovering Brawls. But hey, if you recover a Brawl, whatever, right?
You could run B-King.
You could run B-King Undisputed. Yes, totally. And which, yeah, I'm really excited about this card. And I think there's enough use cases where existing meta decks could find a home for it, but I also think that this could build new strong decks off the back of the action synergies, which are continuing to get support. So A tier for me. Maybe we're too high on it. You let us know in the comments, guys, but I just think it's just a great card that enforces itself. Like, it doesn't need too much else. Yeah, well, yeah, it takes out castles, has evasive. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. Let's talk about Hades' strong arm, Gibby. This is a little tragic, I think. Is there an argument for Hades to go in C tier, or should this be relegated to the binder?
To the binder. I don't think there's much to say about it. I think it's a 5 cost uninkable. It's uninkable. Ruby already struggles with trying to fit uninkables in.
True.
And to justify them, especially like in that 5-drop, 6-drop slot, like it's not even like it's a low cost uninkable. Exerting it and having to spend additional ink on the following turn, which means you're not playing anything relevant on the turn he comes down or the turn after. You're losing one of your characters to banish a chosen character. It's not good.
It's just too much costs, right? I can see maybe someone slapping 1 copy in if it was inkable, because then if you don't need it, you ink it. I can see someone playing this if you didn't have to, pay the 3 cost for it, right? So that, but I mean, there's already the Namari that blows up itself in another card. This maybe would allow you to blow up a Turnabog's Followers or a Magic Room or something like that, right? Like,
or to recast Lilo and then blow it up from your discard pile, and then blow it up, and then
shout
blow
out to the new Lilo
up.
that recovers, that comes in. You can play it from the discard pile. But yeah, I think this is just way overpriced for the effect, which is such a bummer because I love Hades. Getting another legendary Hades would be awesome, and it is awful. So I think we can safely put this one in the D tier. Let's move on to Sapphire cards, and let's talk about Oswald, the Lucky Rabbit. Now, we've known this card has been coming for a while, but what we didn't know is the context, right? The context is there is so much more item support coming in this set, including, and I think I'm more excited about this than everyone else I've talked to, but the microbots, being able to like put as many copies in a deck as you want of microbots, right? So you can truly build an incredibly item dense deck if you want, and you're not limited by the number of items you can put in the deck that are at all playable. So, okay, Oswald, uninkable 2 cost, 2/1, Quest for 2. Did he need to quest for 2? Probably not, but he does. Because this effect says, during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you can reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an item card, you may play it for free, regardless of its cost, and it enters play exerted. Otherwise, put it on the bottom. That's every time a card is put into your inkwell. Not the first time, okay? Not the second time, like Chicha. It's every time. And it's going to keep digging for item cards every time you ink something. And if you flip an item, it's not limited like Queen Diviner on what the cost is. So if you really want to start building a weird itemy toolbox thing with high cost items, you could. Do I think that'll be the way to go? Probably not. But man, I just can't look at this card and think about, one, the time of the game it comes into play, right? Two, the ability to turn around on the following turn and go, ink. Fishbone Quill, ink. I can't not and potentially sing One Jump with Oswald. I can't not look at this and go, like, I think this is really pretty cool. Potentially really, really strong.
I think this card is between S and A for me. Like,
yeah,
because it's not limiting what items come into play if you flip it. You can scry using, if you pair it with like purple or other tools to like look at the top card of your deck. You've got the 1 cost Merlin's Cottage, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
To be able to like where it flips the top card
That's
of your deck. So you know that it's gonna hit.
Well, but like, I don't think you're ever not. I guess you could elect not to use the effect if it's something that's not an item, but that it is something you want. Because it is a May trigger, so like you don't have to do this every time you ink something. But I think that the idea here is like, it doesn't matter if you know what's on top. You're just hoping you get free cards. And I mean, if you build a deck with 30 items in it,
like the day that you play this on 2, and then you ink on 3 and flip Lucky Dime, or you flip Great Stone Dragon.
Great Stone Dragon, Maurice's Workshop, I think, is a card that is beautifully designed to go with Oswald.
Fantastic. Like, there are so many great items that you could play in this build. Like, even if you flipped like a hero, like the Medal of Heroes, like for turbo, like
if you really
like, there's a lot of really good items to flip with this. I think this is at minimum like a staple now for blue in the early drops.
I would like to petition to put it in S tier, because I think it's of these cards, and a little bit of spoilers for the future cards, I think it might be the only card that it will be possible to be S tier. Like, I think a lot of these other cards are cool, and most of them are, especially the ones that we got. It's funny because they front loaded a lot of the legendaries that were not that good. And then I was kind of looking at the set like, what's the point? But I do think there's a lot of B tier and up, right? But I look at this as like, this card, and I don't even think Maui has the possibility to define and warp a meta. I think Oswald, maybe not now, but in the future, truly has a chance to define a format.
I think this card is going to surprise people even now, and I think it will straight win games, and there won't be a dang thing you can do about it if you don't have item removal.
Well, or if you don't pack your deck full of babooms and fire the cannons. I mean, the thing about meta warping is not saying that the card can't be answered or that it is a god tier card. It is the idea that people are building their decks to counter that card, right?
And in the past, you may even wait to play Oswald past 2. Just so that way you can affect
and
it
that's the other thing.
Times.
If you are on turn 5, you can play Oswald, then ink for turn, then tap your Quill or your Great Stone Dragon. Like, he's not only good on 2, he's good later in the game. If you're getting a bunch of free items, charging up your Lucky Dimes, like and getting your Tamatoas, bigger, and maybe making that Sheriff of Nottingham cheaper because you're flooding items on the board. I don't know. Like, it feels like the possibilities are just so open with Oswald that, like, I feel like we have to put him up there out of respect to the open-endedness of the card.
Yep, I think it's great.
Yeah. Let's talk about Baymax. Awesome new addition of Big Hero 6 to this game. Love that movie. Cool to see Baymax here. Gibby, run through this card. Give me your first impressions, because this is supporting an archetype you and I have messed around with a lot in the past, not so much recently.
Yeah, so it's a 5-cost inkable 2/6 in Sapphire, armored companion, storyborn, hero, and robot. The robot keyword is going to be very relevant during this set. The treatment is working whenever you play this character and whenever he quests. So keep that in mind. Twice, whenever you play and whenever he quests. You may remove up to 2 damage from another chosen character of yours. Gain 1 lore for each damage removed this way. I am really liking this card. Because of the ability to get it off on the turn it comes down, and the turn that, like, if you quest with it, so you're gaining the 2 lore from questing, and you're going to get the ability, and you might be able to get an additional 2 lore from removing 2 damage from one of your chosen characters. Like, and I think this card is fantastic as a top deck.
Yeah,
it could win you games.
Yep.
I think it's tough because people are going to always compare this as when we're talking about like it being a meta warping or like a staple card. Especially in Sapphire, item decks are the most prevalent in Sapphire, so people are always going to put it in that context. And I don't even think this is where it needs to go, but I think this opens up more for Sapphire. I honestly could push this to meta warping. I think it's at minimum a staple.
I'll agree to staple for sure. And I think the reason is I think it is asking players to play blue decks that are not item focused. Yeah. Well, in which let's talk about this, right? So like let's think about what other blue decks have been played that are not what do you call that are not item decks. So we have seen some light experimentation with hero decks with steel. Well, hey, Baymax is a hero and it's inkable, right? And those decks are often value trading, right? Playing things like Robin Hood, Champion of Sherwood, swinging into things, taking damage on their Robins, etc. Right? You're looking at things like Amber, Sapphire, like Mufasa decks that are playing a lot of like quick lore gain cards, right? Like Hans and the Donald Duck that, it's an aggro deck, but with the Mufasa sort of top end, trying to like churn that little extra bit out. Well, Baymax ain't bad if you do need to stop and take a value trade, right? Like I think Baymax is inherently a mid-range card, but he actually slots into, faster strategies because of the lore gain components, right? Also, I don't know if it's possible to make a red blue deck that is at a high enough level, right? Without items, because that is the main card draw of both of these two colors, but naturally synergizes with things like Mother Gothel and Mulan, which come in with damage counters. I think that it's really hard to look at, and here's the other thing too. I do wonder if now we're at the stage of the game where, even though there is not anywhere near enough removal cards in blue or in Sapphire, sorry, they're the same thing, blue or in yellow. I wonder if we have enough powerhouse, like raw good stuff characters that we can start looking at a mid-range Mufasa deck that can compete at the same level as a red yellow Mufasa deck, just hitting different synergies, trading things in, healing them with this and Rapunzel. I just wonder if we're there yet. And that's the thing where we need to look at the card pool. But I think inherently this is a card that truly could become a staple in non-item blue decks for years to come.
It's a great top deck. It will win you games as a top deck, or can win you games as a top deck. It's great to flip. It's inkable. It's not bad stats overall. I mean, the two attack is a little low, but overall not bad. I think this is a great card.
Let's get the last two knocked out. That is Steel. Here we have Ham Hands. 6 cost, uninkable. We're really sort of committing to this Wreck-It Ralph being uninkable and being big, but that's okay, because I think this may be one of the few legendaries that are uninkable that we still look at. This and Oswald, maybe, and Tiana, that we're like, it's not a big deal. Like, it's not a big deal that this is uninkable, I think. 4/4 stats, quests for a whopping 3, and then has the ability, I wreck things. Whenever this character quests, you may banish chosen item or location to gain 2 lore. Oh, man. I mean, it doesn't have to be your item or location. It
That's
could be
the thing that
theirs.
people didn't initially realize, is that we were thinking there's no way it could be somebody else's, right? It can.
It can. And I think that's what makes this good. I think this card, I'm going to pitch it to you. You were going nuts over this card when it first got previewed, and I pumped the brakes, like in our chat, right? I think upon further consideration, I think it could be A tier. But I think to do that, it would have to break our definitions, right? So if we look at these as like cards that are being splashed as like, this deck wants Tiana, but the rest don't, right? Or this deck might want Genie, but it's really just Blurple decks, and not even all of the Blurple decks, right? I think there's an argument that like Steel decks might just want to play 1 copy of this in every Steel deck, maybe even 2 copies in every Steel deck. So like, even though it's not an auto 4 of, right? I think every Steel deck is going to strongly consider splashing one of these unless it's like aggro or something, right? So like, if I'm looking at the fact that like when I play Emerald Steel, would I play 1 copy of this? Maybe. I mean, I might just take 1 copy of Ana out. Like, I don't know, ask Zan. He see what Zan thinks about it. But like, I think about like Sapphire Steel. Love Sapphire Steel. You can totally splash just 1 or 2 copies of a random uninkable in the deck. And this thing, the questing for 3, the solid stats, the fact that you can immediately halt another, item player's, building phase. Get rid of their Greystone Dragons, get rid of their Fishbone Quills. Even getting rid of a Popsicle sometimes is fine, and you're gaining lore for it. Also, just blow your own ones up if you're Sapphire Steel. Like, if you just want the free lore, right? You play this in. I think you can play this in a Steel Fasa deck, right? Where Mufasa is looking for things to roll off the Mufasa. Well, Wreck-It Ralph feels pretty darn good. Also, you know what else feels good? Playing it on turn 4 after using Gaston. I think this card is it is a tech card. It is inherently answering what your opponent's doing, but it is so good at that, and so flexible with answering your opponent's stuff, that I think a lot of Steel decks are going to want to they're going to try to fit a copy or 2 in the deck. I think I will be putting like 1 copy in all my Steel decks, because I like having ridiculously powerful 1 or 2 of legendary like cards that are flexible in terms of when you play them, even if they're uninkable.
Shoot, I mean, and because it's a hero, you've also got multiple ways as well to protect it. Like, if you want to give it ward by either playing Cogsworth or by playing, like, if you can drop this after you play a Cogsworth on 5 give a resist. I'm thinking you could play it afterwards. You could play Aurora,
Prince
and then
Philip.
you could play this. Like, you could play the Prince what?
Prince Philip with green.
Prince Philip, which I'm super high on that card. I'm just waiting for that card to be busted.
Maybe.
But this is another hero. So like, you could play Prince Philip and give it the protection from it being hero with ward.
Yeah.
I do think this card will be good. I'm okay with the between B and A. Like, it, depending on what our definitions are going to be, I think that's more of what it is like kind of a definition question. But it could be a low amount staple.
I think that it is one of those cards that I think it is better than everything in B tier. I don't think it necessarily perfectly fits into our little categories of this being like, it's a 4 of. But I do think that every Steel deck is going to consider this guy. So I feel like
the number of copies you put in your deck could be like a flexible, depending on what your uninkable count looks like, or how many spots you've got available. And you could justify probably anywhere between 1 to 3 copies of this. Most likely 1 to 2, though.
there are enough decks that play items and or locations that this is going to get a ton of value. And if you're a deck that plays any amount of items, which by the way, if you're playing this card, why not just jam 4 Fortispheres in it, which basically are cantrips themselves out anyways, right? And then you'll be able to collect the lore off of them. Yeah, and he quests for freaking 3. Anyways, let's move on to John Silver, Stern Captain. Gibby, what are your thoughts on this artwork? I gotta be honest, I don't love it. I don't love the artwork.
I think the arm looks so different than the rest of his body, and the fact that he's got like this like weird grin on his face, like I don't know. I'm not super high on the.
I mean, John Silver is not a very good looking dude in the movie, but it's like weird because it looks so different from how he normally looks, which I get it. He's a Floodborn, but still, like, and he's got this weird chunky plate armor in the middle. I don't know. It doesn't feel very piratey to me. It feels more like I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Let's talk about the actual card. I just have gripes. 8 cost inkable. John Silver, Stern Captain, 6/6 stats, quest for 2, has villain and alien and pirate and captain and Floodborn. There's 5 relevant keywords, let's be real. Shifts for 5. Okay. I mean, I don't know how often you really want to get rid of your 3-drop John Silver that just goes so hard in the paint if you have locations, but all right.
Yeah.
Resist 2, that's nice. That's nice. That's kind of the like Cinderella, the big Cindy effect, right? The resist 2 and high stats makes it almost impossible to get rid of her from damage. And then don't just sit there. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to each opposing ready character. Gibby, I'm not going to say any more. Tell me your thoughts.
I think this actually really could be an interesting card for a couple reasons. One, I think that having played some aggressive location decks, I think there is a consideration where you're playing John Silver on 3 after having played a couple locations, and if they try to deal with John Silver, then that means your locations are getting lore. And you're probably pumping up your location lore, and you're doing well. Your strategy is working. If they deal with your locations, okay, well now you've got John Silver on board, and you're not really too concerned about shifting away from him, and you've got this 5-cost shifter that is going to be trying to clear up the rest of their board. He's really tough to remove, and he's gaining solid lore, and he's removing their board. I do think I think this is a really good complement of like a what if scenario where if they clear one scenario of your locations, then you're cool shifting it. But if they clear John Silver, then you just ink this guy and you keep pumping with your locations and keeping the tempo up. So I do think this complements the 3-drop John Silver very well. And his keywords being captain and all of that are very good to play along with, or the pirate along with the Jolly Roger. But I don't know. Like,
I think the problem would be, what if you can't shift him? Then like, those location decks never get very high in ink.
Like you'd only play him if you're going to be able to shift him. Otherwise, if you don't see a path forward in which you think by the next turn or turn 2 or turn 5, like you're going to be able to shift him, then you ink. Like and I think that's fine.
Okay.
I do see that this card being okay, but I think the deck type in which he's applicable is very niche.
It feels very niche. Like the other idea I had is this is more like meme or even maybe rogue deck eventually, is like the ping Emerald Steel. And it's really nice because he hands out damage at the start of the turn, but only to ready characters. And this is the thing where, like, I think if it just said to each opposing character, I'd be like, cool. That's great.
Just each character regardless. Like, why not? He's an 8-cost card.
Why not? He's an 8 drop. What's wrong with that? Anyways,
just every turn he does a whirlwind. Like, that would be great.
That's what that deck needs. That Emerald Steel ping deck needs a easy to implement whirlwind effect. But right now, they're just so reluctant to print anything that just does 1 damage. I mean, heck, I've been talking about this off camera a lot, which is how desperately this game, much less in the Emerald Steel like Hyena / Robin Hood package, needs a whirlwind effect that hits things. Yeah,
we've talked about that, including
we've talked about this.
Stuff.
Including your own stuff would be fine. I mean, honestly,
You need a pyromancer.
Ruby would love that. Yeah, pyromancer for the Hearthstone heads here, right? So, anyways, I think it's cool. Are we thinking C tier?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the effect.
I'm glad.
I think the effect is good enough where you could find some potential for it, but I just don't. This is not a meta. It's not in a deck right now that exists in the meta that I think we can easily see making its way into the meta because of other powerful synergies that are with it. But it is a deck you could make because the cards exist for it to make a deck, but it's not currently meta, and I don't foresee it being meta either.
Yeah. All right, well, that is our tier list. Gibby, before we leave, is there anything on here last minute after putting everything in here that you would move? Anything that you want to move up or down contextually to the other things in the column? I think it's pretty good. I think I'm just going to move this all the way to the end because I think it's the worst of these cards, this Simba, but I know you don't completely agree.
I think it is good in the B. I don't think it needs to be moved out of B, but I do think it is like questionable in B. The only other card, if you were to try to balance this and you said, I want harmony amongst this, and if you had to move one of the A's to S, I think we're looking at Maui.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I really like the S and the A's. I hate to say it, I think we nailed it. Now, fast forward 3 months, and we'll probably look like doofuses somewhere in this in this tier list. But yeah, get in the comments. Let us know what you all think about our tier list, about these cards, what decks you want to play them in, what synergies are you excited for Azurite Sea. We are going to be producing more content supporting Azurite Sea in the next 2 weeks leading up to its release. Including where Gibby and I are going to put together 15 decks, one deck for every ink combination of new ideas or deck strategies, and try to fit in as many of these new cards to give you a cool starting point for the first week of League when you get back after opening all those packs on release night. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. We'll check you out on the next video, and yeah, good luck with your polls.